Nigeria industry, sports, life. Improving business with data. My name is Vincent Edward, Business Technology and Support Manager, Intercontinental Distillers Limited. And it's my pleasure to moderate today's event, which brings top personalities from prestigious industries and the hearts to Rome Business School, so that our community can help and learn from. I'm excited about today's program. Today we have our special guest, Professor Marshall Langer, who will be speaking to us on the topic, improving business decisions with data. I'm going to start by bringing up Professor Marshall Langer to tell us about himself and his professional history. Professor Langer, please, you have the floor.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
If you'd like, I can share the screen and show a presentation.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, let me see over here. Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, so you can see the screen, right?
Yes.
So my understanding was of the call that we would discuss some of the topics covered in the data science masters and just some examples of the parts I do, obviously. And I can tell you about my background. Is that what you'd like to know? Okay. Okay, all right, well, I'll just get started. Let's see, let me just make sure I can see myself. Okay, so what I have here.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Buongiorno.
All right, I'm gonna.
Buongiorno, Katia.
Hello, hello.
Buongiorno.
Hello.
Buongiorno, Mauro.
Okay. So I just shared a link. If you go to that Dropbox link, if you're interested, okay, you'll see, let me just show what you'll see. You will see this, okay? And so there's the notes that I'm using and then some Excel files, all right, that we're going to discuss a little bit, just some of the concepts of the class. Okay, so.
Okay, good. Excuse me.
Sure.
You shared the link via email?
No,
or,
by the chat.
Through this chat?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see it.
Marshall, can I ask you what's link?
What?
Emma.
No, sorry, I can't. I got to be on the other call. Sorry. Hello. How are you, Kathy? I have to stop. I don't know how to stop.
I'm well, thanks.
Okay.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno dottoressa Mariotti, come sta? Sono Emma di Petrillo, ho la mascherina.
Okay.
Buongiorno, buongiorno.
All right, sorry about that.
Tutto bene, tutto bene. E voi?
Hold on, let me close
Bene,
this.
benissimo.
Tutto bene.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so you have the link, all right? So if you go to the link, you can get any of the files that we're using here. So let me just, as was requested, I'll just tell you very briefly my background, and then we can look at just some examples of the kind of things that we'll do in the program, all right? Again, I'm not a programmer, so perhaps one of the other instructors is going to speak to you about that aspect of it. There's definitely using databases and programming. I'm more of a data analysis. Anyway, just very briefly, I had a number of jobs growing up, supermarket, construction, family business, things like that. My main work after university was working in investment banking. So we used a lot of relatively complex analysis. We're doing large leverage buyouts and mergers all over the world, multi-billion-dollar mergers. So I learned a lot doing that. I went to get an MBA degree at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. I worked also at a hedge fund doing merger arbitrage, bond arbitrage, things like that. Sounds more complicated than it is. I worked in marketing for a short period at this large multinational. I studied group therapy and counseling for about 2 years at a hospital institute and at NYU. I worked for the World Food Program for a year, all over the world doing some different projects. And I've lived in a number of different countries and worked many countries in the world, I would say at this point. I would also just add this, like, I think this is an important aspect of the Rome Business School, I would say. Everyone that I've met there is experienced, has business experience. And so anything that I've said ever, I think, well, what would the people I work with think? Like, is that something they would appreciate? So I worked with the former president of the Blackstone Group, the current president of Oracle, the president of the Bloomberg Company, founder and president of another large investment company. So a number of the people that even more that aren't on the list. So I think that when I think about, how to present an analysis or how to present your findings, I'm basing it at least on my experience of what, they would appreciate. Are there any questions about that? That's very brief. Are there any questions about anything that we've said so far? Okay. All right. So if any questions, just jump in. If I talk too fast, okay. All right. So what I thought I would do is just show you that the program deals with complex type of work, not simple analysis. I think you can learn anywhere. All right, learning how to program things in Excel macros, using Power BI or Tableau, these kind of data dynamic graphing programs, among things that are not really my area: programming, Python programming, SQL Server, databases. So quite good preparation for either or both of a data analyst, like a credit analyst, or a network systems manager, from what I can see. Okay. All right. So the first thing I just wanted to do is just discuss something about more complex use of Excel. So I'm going to open up a file called Capacity Planning More Complex. I just want to show you what it does and then demonstrate, not to go over in class, but just to show you these are the kind of formulas you would learn. Okay. Thank you. But I've been fired. I've been kicked off deals. Believe me, it's not only up. All right. But it was all in all very nice experience. Work with some very good people. Okay, so I'm going to go here to the Excel folder. This is the Dropbox link. All right, if you go to the Excel folder and you open the one called Capacity Planning, you can see what it is. Okay, you can see it. Now, we're not going to spend time today going over, as we would in class, how to write the formulas. I just want to show you the kind of analysis someone could do. All right, that's the point. But then they have to learn how to develop it, so which I'll show you. All right, just very briefly, this is a capacity plan. So you might work for a company like, I don't know, Apple, and they want to know how many warehouses or production facilities should we build. Well, they have to develop a set of projections. All right, so that's what this is in two different markets. Let's say it's Europe and America or whatever. Right, and you generally have multiple cases when you look at something, multiple scenarios. So that's what this shows: a robust economy, an average economy, and a recession economy for two different markets. Now, down here is the demand. Okay, so you have two things: demand and capacity. Okay, so this is the different levels of demand depending on what case I use. So if we use, for example, instead of case 1, case 2, all the numbers automatically change. Okay, so this is, I think, what I saw on Wall Street. It's professional type of analysis. People don't have time for copying and pasting. That's not proper work. So we really try to emphasize, here's how you demonstrate professional work, paginated properly. It's what you can submit. Okay, so okay, that's the demand part. Then we have the capacity part. So thinking about, what does a company want to know? A company wants to know, how many factories should we build? I mean, these things cost, $50 million, $30 million, whatever I made up. You don't want to just build it if you don't need it. But the problem is, you don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be a great economy or a bad economy? So what we want to look at is, what happens if we build for a great economy and it's a bad economy? How much would we suffer? All right, so let me just show you the analysis and then, slightly how it's constructed, and then we can move on to the next one. So what I would do, and which they would learn in class, and which I learned working in finance, you put a 1 here. Now, it's going to assume higher demand, and then based on the formulas here, these sort of little bit complicated if statements, the warehouses will, the warehouses will be built. Okay, so you can see with a optimistic case, you have this. If I use for example, recession scenario, I have far fewer factories. Okay, so that's how it works. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to build for factory 1. All right, I'm going to assume that's the level of demand. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take these where the formulas are, like this, and I'm going to make numbers so they don't change. That's copy, edit, paste special. So, well, let me copy, edit, paste special, and then values. Okay, so now these numbers are fixed. They won't change. So I now make this a 3. Now, what's going to happen? We're going to have an enormous amount of overcapacity. We have all this capacity, but not the demand to match it. Well, we want to know, what's worst case scenario? What would that cost us? So down here, I have the total cumulative cost of overbuilding. All right. And so what I've done, I've developed formulas that figure out where there's the overcapacity, and then I put a price on it on a per like square foot basis. All right. So anyway, that's not that complicated, but let's just say for every unused square foot in the warehouse, or that'll cost you a certain amount, which I've determined over here. All right. But I don't want to get too caught in the weeds. All right. Just say this figures out the implied or opportunity cost of overbuilding and having warehouses with excess capacity. Now, the complicated part for someone that what they would learn in this class is writing these formulas. All right. This is not, it's not rocket science, but it's pretty hard. I mean, I would give this an 8 out of 10 in Excel, like from my experience. I work with a lot with Excel. So this is what, though, a good company expects. They, you work at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs or a company like that, Google, they expect this type of work. So now I know it costs $38 million if I overbuild. Now let's see what happens if I underbuild. So I'm going to go Command Z like this. Why doesn't it undo it? It should undo it. Edit. Can't undo. Why can't it undo it? I don't know. That's strange. All right, let me reopen it. I don't know why it's doing something funny. Let me just reopen the file. Okay. All right. So sorry about that. All right. So now I'm going to see what happens if I underbuild, case 3, and I go the same thing, copy, paste special values. So I get rid of the formulas. And now I'm going to run case 1. Now what's going to happen is we're going to have a huge number of missed sales. Well, the missed sales is each missed sale times a profit of $100 a unit. So if we miss out on all these sales because we underbuild, that's going to cost us $300 million. So that's how I would make a recommendation. I would say in this case, we never know the future, but it makes sense to overbuild because underbuilding costs us $300 million and overbuilding costs $38 million. So this is the kind of analysis I saw. I never saw anyone say, I know the future, and I'm sure in 3 years, this is the amount. That's absurd. All right. What they do want to know is worst case scenario, what is the magnitude? And that helps us make an informed decision. And that's what I would say this does. Okay. Now, lastly, these numbers can change. It's all based on sort of the cost of the factory, the cost of the product. So for example, if the cost of the product is much less profitable, say it's very low profit, well, now this is a much different number. All right. That's why. So we also teach, instruct, any computer type of program has to be linked. You put a number in and then it's linked. You don't put numbers in twice. You don't put numbers in the output section. So there's a professional way of doing this. And I would say, the goal is not just to learn Excel, it's to develop analyses that help people make more informed decisions, which I would say this is. Then lastly, what is it? It's doing something strange. I don't know why it doesn't let me undo the formula, but all right. So reopen it. Also what they'll learn is things like writing these if statements, which are important. Nested if and, all very useful things. Writing this logic down here is also important. And additionally, what I always try to do is say, this is not bad. It's decent Excel. But if you want to try something really hard, here's 2 extra credits. So if they go here to sheet 3, those extra credits are done. And it's even more complicated. But I think it's wise to have people see, what is it I really need to do to succeed at an upper level? Like if you can't do this, you cannot get ahead in the company I worked in. And that's a finance company and people are going to want to work there. So I think a couple of things. You should learn the basics. You should learn how to use the basics to generate analyses that help people make informed decisions. And then you should see something slightly more complex to know, wow, if I really want to work at a decent level, I got to sit down and really learn this. So that's the first one. This is relatively complex, but definitely, these are people studying to be data scientists, and that's, I think, something they need to know. Are there any questions about anything we've said so far? Okay. All right. So again, you have the file. If you're interested in looking at it, it shows what this shows, all this stuff. All right. So it's not only Excel. My section is usually data analysis, Excel, but how to use it to help people make more informed decisions. But that's part of it, is being able to write some of this code down here. That's, you have to learn. Okay. And then there's always extra review questions, things like that. Okay. All right. So that's the first one, just to demonstrate one example. All right. Capacity planning and some of the things you would get. All right. Now I want to show something else. This one is not really Excel. It just uses Excel as a presentation tool. It could be Word. All right. Another thing now, obviously, is analyzing data. It's not even now. It's always been. They make it sound like it's now, Google Analytics, and, you had supermarket data. So for example, let's open this file, analysis Starbucks and Power BI sample. Okay. So I'm going to open, let me close this one. All right, is it clear what the other one shows? It just shows a capacity plan, and you want to know what's the likely choice, what's a more informed choice, overbuild or underbuild, and what's the order of magnitude, so it helps make a more clear decision. Okay, now big data, Starbucks. Okay, all right, what you have here is not even that much, but let's say on a company, Starbucks, you have some information about your customers, gender, income, miles from the place, and annual spending. All right, you could have much more. You could have information on a telecom company about, is it, how are they do streaming? Do they have DSL? How old are they? How long have they been a customer? What kind of contract? I mean, there's many, lots of data you can gather. And I think two things. It's very important to know, which we try to emphasize in class. Again, there's no right answer. We base it on experience, but what is the right data to get? I think people think, oh, data is king. No, it's not. Analyzing it properly is king. And it's knowing what are the important statistics if you're analyzing Starbucks or if you're analyzing a telecom company, then how to make sense of it. But most importantly, how to make an informed recommendation to say, based on our budget and the market, I recommend we spend 3 million and we target this group of people, more frequently 3 times per week. So that's also something I personally think you must give a recommendation in the end based with numbers, with dollar amounts. If the boss disagrees or the committee disagrees, let them disagree, but at least they have a starting point. So I think which data to gather, how to look at it to gain insight, and then how to make the recommendation in a professional, informed way with numbers, not just we should do this, dollar amounts, and then people can say, no, I don't agree, but it's a starting point. You have to make a recommendation. All right, so here we have this data, okay? So we would say, all right, what do we want to do with this data? How do we analyze the data? Well, what I did over here, I did this one. I could take this one out. I don't need that one. Okay. I analyzed it first, just female versus male, right? And you see that this is the spending at Starbucks, female versus male. Women spend on average about 1,300 a month. Men spend on average about 1,320. So very close. So then you think, that doesn't really tell me anything. There's not much difference in the way men and women spend. Well, what about if we look at men who make over 50,000 versus women who make over 50,000? Well, now let's see if that's different. All right, so what I would then do, I would sort this on gender and income. So I would color this in like this. You could do data, sort. So what column was it? Hold on, sorry. Column L and M, okay, sorry. Data sort, column L, then you sort again by column M. Okay, all right, so now I can look at just women who make over 50,000 a year, let's say, so this, and see what they do. All right, so let's just, I'll do it right below it. All right, so average. And so this is female, and this is the spending of women who make over 50. They spend 1,700. Now, if we do the same thing for men, right, this is a very simple example, but I think it gives you a sense for what we're trying to do. Men over 50. All right, so there now you see a very large difference. Okay, so women and men total, there's not much difference in their habits. But when you look at women who make over 50,000 a year and how much they spend at Starbucks versus men who make over 50,000 a year, now you see a difference that can be investigated. And that's the point. That's one of the main points in data analysis. You have to cut it, slice it, cut it, be relentless until you find an answer. All right, then you would investigate. What is it about men that make more money? Why are their habits different than men that make less money? What can I gain insightfully that I can help raise that 1,200 to a higher number? What are women doing differently? Then you might categorize it again. Men who make over 50,000 who live within 5 miles of the store, and see, is there a difference in 5 miles versus 10 miles? All right, so it's not, again, it's none of it's rocket science. It's just being relentlessly determined to get some insightful answer. Then once you develop it, you can look at things like the variability using standard deviation and make recommendations and say women, let's say women who earn over 50,000 spend considerably more than men. So what we need to do is open small Starbucks locations very close to, high-end office buildings where you'd have a predominance of men or something working, and that's a good strategy, all right? Because we could make more money off men because we make more off lower income men, all right? So that might be a recommendation. Or, again, I think people pay you to come up with ideas. So why might this be the case? Maybe it's, not positioned closely enough to where men work. It could just be women go with friends more as a social gathering and men don't, especially men that make more money, maybe are busier. And, something else about drinking habits or coffee or eating habits or break time during the day. But there is a reason, and you'd have to figure it out. And then based on that, realize we can raise this if we advertise differently, if we position the store differently. Now you're talking about, possibly a big investment, but is it worth it? How big is the market? All right. So it's not just data analysis, it's business sense, common sense, recommendation, understanding investment, capital allocation, all of these things are what companies do. All right. So the goal, obviously, again, for the second or third time, is that you help people make more informed decisions. And then they like you. Then they think you're a good employee. All right. Just going in with your opinion all the time, no one cares about that. It has to be based on evidence and work. All right. Now, so that's just an example. Now, there are these programs. If you're not familiar with them, I would get familiar, I guess. Power BI and Tableau. What I did, I think I put it down here. Did I put it? No, I thought I did. Okay. Anyway, I thought I put how to download it. I guess I can add it. Okay. So, you know where it is? Sorry, it's here. If you're interested to learn more about Power BI or Tableau, if you click this link, you can find a bunch of information about it, how to download both for free. Power BI is for the Microsoft, Tableau is for the Mac. They essentially do a similar thing, dynamic graphing. So let me show you an example of what they do, right, rather than opening them. So for example, I'm going to sheet 2 of this Starbucks analysis. So it's the same numbers here. Well, let's take a look. Let's say I did a graph on spending annually based on income. So what is the relationship at Starbucks or any company to spending and income? Well, you can see that there's not much of a relationship at all. The dots have no real pattern. It's pretty flat. So the more you make, there's no real determination of spending versus spending on Starbucks, the y-axis, and income. So this would be the first graph, let's say, in a Power BI graph. Then you would filter it and say, well, let me look at just men who are men only spending annually based on income. So it's a subset of this chart. So I'm going to look at not everyone, just men only. So you can easily, with Power BI, just filter men only. And then you see, based on that, now we have a completely different chart. So you would say, oh, wow, that's interesting. When we look at everyone together, there's no discernible difference. But when we look just at men spending, there's a difference. There's a apparent relationship between income and spending at Starbucks. All right, you would do the same for women and see that graph might look different. And then you have to try to understand why is this a different trajectory? But what these programs do that are extremely useful, that companies insist, you have to have Excel and Power BI, this kind of dynamic graphing. It's called data presentation. So then you might say, well, this isn't enough. It's just the 45-degree angle. Let's say we looked men only spending annually based on income over 100,000. So now I'm making another subset. And then that graph looks more like this. So then you would say, well, why is there less relationship between income and spending for men that make more money? I don't know. You have to investigate that. You have to know what to research. So if someone said, this is an issue, you might allocate to an employee, you might say, work on this for an hour, work on this for a day, work on this for 2 days, and come back to me with a report. So then we would talk about in class, what kind of report do they want to see? What would you research? Who would you call? If you can't get the direct information, where's the starting point? So we talk about all of that. You might talk to an expert, get an insight, start looking at things online, call up people that are in the industry. I mean, companies, from my experience, want you to be relentless about getting research, right? If someone wants you to research a market, they expect really, really detailed information that they can make an informed decision. Like if a law changes, what's the cost really to the dollar? Or if they reroute a street, or if consumer taste change, you have to identify these things, all right? So we talk a lot about in class, corollary ways to do that, ways to do research, how to weight different data. Again, mostly based on experience, really. I did a lot of research into different markets for that, for they were going to make a big investment. So it was good, learned a lot because they're very intense about it. So anyway, I think you cannot go get a job now without a little bit of mastery of this form of graphing. The programs are not hard, but it's to know what is the right data, what insight do I get, what recommendation can I make, what additional research am I going to do, How much am I going to spend? These are obviously critical decisions people have to make, but the graphs can help get you started along the way. Okay, I would just also add the research is not linear. I mean, it's really, you gather information, you sift it, you go in another direction, you gather more. You're just trying to inform yourself and learn as much as you can about the market and then make an informed decision as though you've been working in it for 20 years when you've been working on it for 2 days. But the more you do, the better you get. All right, so that's another type of the analysis we would do. Large data analysis. If this was 10,000, 10 million lines long, obviously, you need graphing programs. So dynamic graphing, that's covered in some of the courses on data presentation. Okay, so that's two things. The first one is the more complex Excel formulas with a little more difficult trial to do a capacity plan is one of infinite examples. And the second one is data analysis, let's call it large data. Also, we cover Google Analytics and how to interpret that. But with all data analysis, it can be argued, it can be discussed. There's no, this is the answer. You might have one view, I might have another. I substantiate my view with evidence. We come to, some kind of consensus. Okay, is it okay so far? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but anyway, this is what I thought would be beneficial. Okay, so that's two things. Let's take a look at this. All right, again, it's not only long Excel files, there's also what I found, sometimes things just are a little tricky to figure out. So I think and again, from my own experience learning that, I think like we should cover some of this in class. So what we do sometimes is like maybe watch a short video. There's one, for example, that I'm thinking of on Amazon, the warehouse, or the other one is on a food production facility for Emirates Airline, a big food production, and it shows how the food is made for the airline. Well, after watching it, I will ask, and I'm sure the other instructors do too, is say, if you were manager of that, what is like 3 or 4 key indicators of like success? How do you know if that factory or that facility is doing better today than yesterday? So that comes up a lot. And a student will say, oh, I would look at margins. I'm like, well, how? Which margin? Like you try to push. I don't get enough from that answer. I need to learn something too. So I don't know. That's why I'm asking. So I'll say, but what about, it makes sense to look at desserts versus, meals and see if, is there a relationship change? The main point is, again, I don't think any of this is rocket science. From what I've seen, it's diligence. People that succeed, they're diligent. They look at statistics, they act on it. They look and look and look. They're very, diligent about not being uninformed by using evidence and statistics that they create. All right, so let me just show you this example. All right, again, it's nothing overly earth-shattering, but I think it's like not a bad, I was kind of proud when I did it. It was a little tricky. All right, so let's see, weighted average inventory. Okay, so this is, again, just, we're talking about data analysis. This is data, and, it's sometimes when I think we talk about it, we're talking about large data and programs that find correlations. Yes, those exist, but, a lot of the correlations are spurious. You've got to have some sense anyway about, what makes common sense. Does it make sense that two things are correlated that shouldn't be? Okay, you got to use brains. Now, what this one shows is this. Let's say you hold inventory. I buy something and it costs me $5 a year to hold it. So let's say I'm holding, I don't know, whatever, this water in a warehouse, okay? And each bottle costs me $5 a year. Well, if on average, if I buy 100 and sell them all, on average, I have 50 units. So my cost will be 50 times 5, $250, okay? Because some months I have more than 50, other months I have less than 50, so that's that. But what if it's a little bit different? What if your inventory, most of it, 60% of it is sold within 26 days, and the last 4 days of the month, 40% is sold, not evenly distributed. So these inventory formulas, they figure a linear sale, one a day, let's say, for 30 days. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes you have upfront loaded, back end loaded. So if somebody said, what is the weighted average inventory holding cost? If these are the numbers, there's a temptation to do this, what I did here. This is incorrect, all right? And I think you add a lot of value to go, wait a minute, something's wrong there. All I did there is I did 60% times 26, and then I did 40% times 4, and I got this, and then I added the two together like this, and I divide that by 30 and multiply it times 5, assuming, okay, the weighted average is 2.86. But then I tested it and it doesn't work, because when I make this 50%, right, even though I hold it for more days, this should not be 2.5, exactly half of 5. And so that's wrong. Or if I make this exactly 15 days, in both cases, it comes out to 2.5, which is exactly half, because this is exactly half the days, or if I made this 50%. That's incorrect. That can't work that way. And so one thing I think is very important, again, it's all just learned from work. You have to check things every possible way, right? And you learn the hard way. You go in a meeting and think, oh, I'm good. And the boss asks and it's wrong. And they're like very, very upset because you have a client there that's going to invest $500 million and they're not happy when you cause a mistake like that. All right. So I thought, well, how do you figure this out? What is actually the weighted average? So this is correct. All right. So you need, just to show you, all right, you need a little bit of logic in here. Again, on your own, if you want to look at it and try to understand it, that's, not the point today, is just to show it. So here, now it gives me this number. This is correct. All right. Even though this is 15 and 15, because if I make this 50, now it comes out, okay, it's correct. But all right. So now it's correct. So I think the important lesson here is, let me make this like, let me just try one thing. Like, let's say this was like 2%. It's always good to take like extremes and see if this was 2 days. So almost all of the inventory is held till the end. So it should be a little higher. All right. So most of the inventory is held till the end. Okay. So there it should be a little higher than 2.5. So you just check it. All right. You got to double check it different ways to make sure it's correct. But again, I think many people would do this and get the wrong answer. And I think as a diligent employee, you have to think, wait, and none of this is easy. Like, it's really based on experience, but thinking, what if I try this? What if I try? I'm always saying, like, when I'm in class, like, you got to try this every possible way to make sure, it always works. All right. The formula has to work 100% of the time. So again, one example, another example of the infinite analyses you can do. But trying to reemphasize the point in class, you cannot give work that is incorrect. People lose respect for you. Do that twice, I mean, really, you have trouble after that. So you've got to be very diligent and think and use common sense and, test things out, and just in your head, just even eyeball things. Like, if you're going to give someone data, think, what number should be higher, the last one or the first one? If the last one should be higher and it's not, go redo it. All right, just common sense sometimes. All right, so one other example of just some of the tools, a little bit of, and analyzing data to get an informed answer. Okay. All right. Any questions, just jump in. All right. Another one is this. I think it's important also, because I don't know what someone's going to go into, is learn valuation tools. Some of the tools that are used to do valuations of either asset purchases or companies. All right. So we try to show some, whatever, the same kind of Wall Street type analysis you would see professionally, and say, again, you're not going to see this exact thing, but the idea behind it is important. That anytime a company makes a capital allocation, especially a larger one, they think about it a lot, obviously, that this money is, has an opportunity cost. So we want to try to test it out and get a sense for, are we doing, utilizing the capital most efficiently and most effectively on a risk-adjusted basis, is what you'd say. So let's take a look at this as another example. All right. Now, in this one, I do think the math and the Excel and the programming part of it is not easy. All right, this takes some work. This one is different. There's no programming. It's just thinking, how can I dynamically graph these? What subsets are going to inform me? And how can I make recommendations based on that insight to make money? This one is just one example of the infinite things that you can do, where you at first blush it seems correct, but if you sit down and really think about it, it's not. And that adds, I saw this numerous times, myself included. Someone would come in, make a presentation, everyone's on board, and you're like, wait a second, something doesn't add up. And you look like truly the hero. I mean, you could save a lot of money that way. So you got to think skeptically and always, like, logically think something doesn't make sense. We have to recalculate this. So that's the example there. Then Ryanair. Let's look at Ryanair. Ryanair is an airline, as you know. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago that said they had a new strategy, and they were going to spend $200 million to make it nicer. No waiting in line, better seats, better movies, this kind of thing. So the question is that, should we partner with them? Should we invest in them? What is that worth? What do we, what metrics do we look at? All right, so let's open that. Ryanair. Oh, there's the article. Sorry, that's not what I want. Okay. All right. Again, it's not to be, a finance whiz or something, but I do think it's important to use, data analysis is used a lot in the finance field. So you have to know about valuation work. You'll look silly if you don't, I think. Typically, most types of these sort of quick analyses, this is a simpler one. The first one we did on this one on, where's the Word doc? This one on capacity plan is a little more complicated. I would say that's more of a corporate analysis or sort of an investment banking when you're going to buy a whole company. This one is more quick if you're making a small investment or you're buying part of a company, not the whole thing. So typically, these analyses, from what I saw, are divided like this. There's a volume part of it, a cost part of it, and an income part. Almost always something similar to this. And what you're looking for are the key drivers of success that you're betting on. So what I saw from working in investing field, it comes down usually to some binary thing like, do you believe people will continue to buy at least 2 Apple products? If not, maybe that's a bad news for the company. Or do I believe people will spend $30 per meal at a restaurant when they're currently spending 25? I don't think so. I don't know. That's unlikely. It can happen, but it's unlikely. So it comes down to that. Sometimes, though, it's complicated. Like if you're working with a healthcare company or a software company or an engineering, it could be a more complex relationship. Like a change in the law is going to mean a change in the chemical compound. But my boss, for example, who ended up being the president of the Blackstone Group, very, very smart guy, really a genius. He made billions and billions of dollars. That was his strength. He could zero in the most complex situation on what is the key thing we're betting on, and then let's make a bet or not. So here, what we have is in Ryanair, these are accurate numbers that show us, the planes, the seats, etc. Then they say in the article, we're going to raise capacity or raise, passengers by 10%. Okay, but not adding any new planes or no new seats. Well, the only way then to do that is increasing the load. So if they were to add new planes, for example, then they could have a lower load capacity. So part of it is making sure the math works. All right, that's another thing. The relationship between cost and income. For example, you sell more, you need a bigger truck. A bigger truck means more gas means more insurance. You have this set of relationships that have to be understood from a business standpoint, then put in Excel or any kind of programming you're doing. So then here is the cost part. They said they're going to charge $25 less for checked bags. About 5% of the people check their luggage. So it's going to cost them $145 million with that many passengers. Another 50 million I put because they said it's about 200 million. So just whatever, better food or something. So then down here, currently the company has an equity value, which is shares times price per share, when I did this, of $22 billion. Well, the first thing to think about in any kind of capital allocation is what is a fair risk-adjusted return. And I think this is often not covered enough in school, but it's critical and obviously in business. If you have money to invest at a company, surplus capital from profit, you could put it into a new factory. You could put it into new advertising. You could hire new employees. You could do more training. Well, each of those have different risk and different return. So maybe if you're going to advertise on Facebook, that might be a low risk proposition and a 10% return is justified. But if you're going to use it to do, training globally, that's a higher risk proposition. People might not come. It doesn't work. In order to make it productive, you may have to get a 22% return on that. Proving it by shorter meetings, less conflict. You've got to demonstrate how this is going to be beneficial to the company somehow, knowing that. So I'm assuming here, we want to get about a 25% return on Ryanair's investment. All right, so I think that's fair. So the market value of the company has to go from 22 to $27 billion. That's 25%. Well, how are they going to get there? If this is the current situation, they need to increase the fee per ticket by about $5, increase the net income margin by about 2%, and increase the equity multiple, PE multiple, by about 1. Now, what you want to know is how sensitive this is. What if they can only raise ticket prices $3? Well, we could probably still live with this. What if the margin can only go to 1%? Now it starts to get, I don't know if we can live with this. Like, not making a sufficient return in the eyes of finance is you're losing money. So if I invest in a risky place to do business, in the middle of Mongolia or something, and I get the same return as investing in the middle of Italy, I've actually lost money in the eyes of an investor because I took excess risk and I didn't earn any excess return. So, so then it might be, well, what if they get a 1.5% margin? All right. Is that good enough? And so you say, no, but what if they get 350? Okay, we can live with 18%. That's it. Now you have to determine no more numbers. Talking among yourselves insightfully, can they achieve this? If you believe it, invest. If you don't, don't. All right. But a lot of the type of corporate type of analyses come down to what is the binary choice that we're trying to make? How much shorter do meetings have to be to make training productive? You know, how many new customers do we have to get in that market to make it lucrative enough given the risks of the market? So, you know, again, for the 10th time, none of this you're going to see identically again, but the notions behind it are you know, universal, I would say. Okay, so that's another example from my end. All right, other guys do other things. They do programming, they do Python. In fact, just to mention, I opened the, you know, here, it shows all the different classes, which I'm sure you've reviewed. All right, so I'm more on the data analytics and things, but other people, blockchain, you know, different languages, all of these things, very critical. You know, it's just not my area, but those are also very important. All right, so that's another example of what we're doing, trying to, you know, capital allocation, risk return, capacity plan, data analysis, large data, gaining recommendation and insight, manipulating tools. All of these things I think are what companies, you know, will pay you a lot for. All right, so you can see more here. There's some Q&A. I always try to give some question and answer for people to practice at home, et cetera, et cetera. And let's see. The last thing I would add is this. Another thing that I think is important is learning about sort of automating things, which I think is also really important. You don't want to have to think, oh, I better remember to change that number. That's ridiculous. So I want to just show two things that also we cover somewhat in class. I'm going to show first Excel macros. All right. If you don't know what a macro is, it's programming in Excel. And so if you're going to do the same thing a lot of times, like if I have a, you know, column of numbers, like, you know, like this, whatever, like this, and I want to copy this down to, then this one down to, this one down to, whatever, something like that. And it's, you know, 50,000 lines long, you can automate it. You can write a code in Visual Basic and build a macro. It's enormously time saving sometimes. I did work for the United Nations World Food Program on a couple occasions. And I don't know if anyone works there, but they had this issue where they would have like a location, like, I don't know, just make up a name, like Miami, then they, you know, New York and LA and Chicago. All right. And so they would have trucks here and they would say, oh, we're going to get rid of the trucks in New York and we're going to move them to LA. So then, or, you know, let's say they have two other cities like Dallas and Phoenix. Well, they said, we're going to get rid of Miami and New York and we're going to put Dallas and Phoenix instead. But we want to hide, or let's say LA, we want to hide New York. So what they wanted to do is something like this. Let me just show data. They would put a filter and they would say, get rid of, for example, New York. So it's just Miami and LA like this. Now they want to copy Dallas and Phoenix over Miami and LA. But what happens is it doesn't copy because it copied into where New York was. So it doesn't copy only to the visible cells. So they were spending an enormous amount of time doing it by hand. Well, I went online. I wasn't smart enough to write it, but I found a macro, figured out how it worked. And now all they do is hit like Command Z, and what took 7 hours takes 5 minutes. So it's, again, you know, you want to be that hero at the company that, you know, is on your toes, that looks for opportunity to save time and money and not wait to be told what to do. And I just think if you don't have these skills, someone else does, right? So it can only help you to know how to program Excel macros, use Power BI, use, Excel very efficiently. It's critical, at least at a high level, is what I saw. These guys doing very large projects, they need people with these skills. These are very complex projects sometimes. So Excel macros is something. As an example, I did one once. I'm not a super expert at it, but here, if you want to see what one is, someone paid me once to write it for their business. They had a shipping business and they wanted it to be automated, how to do the forms. They were paying 4 women all day long, 8 hours a day. And then we automated it. And I said, please, don't fire them. But all right, so what you can do, you can see it if you go view macro, view macros, and then you can like edit it or step into it and you can see, all right, and what it looks like. And they're just sort of Visual Basic code. The computer helps you write it initially, then you have to touch it up. But I figured this out. I had no background in this 20 years ago when I did it. I read about it, figured it out. That's another thing I really strongly try to emphasize. Like, don't say I need help. That's not a good thing to say. Just say, I can figure this out. It's a better starting point that I saw, at least the people that I work with that succeeded. So sit down and figure it out before you think I need help. All right, so there's ways to do this using name ranges. And so we try to cover things that were seen in the business world that were in demand and people wanted. The last thing I would just show, as again, infinite examples, is a student actually was asked to do this. A student at the Rome Business School called me, panicked, I don't know, about 8 months ago. And the company had assigned them some work and said, figure this out by tomorrow or you won't get a job here. So we figured it out. All right, it's hard. It's hard. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but just as the idea, they wanted to figure out, they had this ordering thing for this inventory thing they were doing that you had to order 60 days in advance and had to have a minimum order of 1,000. And so without getting into it, we needed to say, for example, here, if you ordered too little, let's say here, then you would have negative here. So it had to look ahead 2 months and figure out what is the right amount to order. Well, the problem is if you change these numbers, like the growth rates, then it's going to be off. So now you need not 2,500, you need like this number has to be 3,500, all right, or more. So what we did in the done one is these are automated. All right, so again, that's another just lesson. Like, are you going to see this exact formula again? No, but always do the most. All right, I just would say never give someone work that's not 101%. Like if you can make it better, make it better. If you can do another insightful thing, like looking at the change over some time and why that is meaningful, or something per square foot, that if anything gives insight, do it, or if you can automate it, do it, because people see your work and they would say, who did this? This is excellent work. I need them for a more complicated project. And that's how you learn. And so I had never done this formula. You figure it out. All right, just trial and error, but it's hard work. Anyway, that's what I put together. There's some good videos here that you can watch about just companies that deal with data analysis, like Facebook, or this one's very, very good on Amazon. It's a long one, but it's excellent. Here's what I talked about, the flight airline. Here's making the iPhone. So we use actual video and say, not only how would you add value, but how would you be the best? So here's another one about people interested in marketing, about how Procter & Gamble uses market insights and data analysis. But my question is too, what would make you not the best one there? Like if there's 10 employees, you should be the first call. Nothing against your coworkers. Maybe they'll raise the standard too, but why should you not? You have an advantage if you're the first call. And so my boss was like obsessed about that. And so we look at that. I'm always also, if there's a video and there's people in the video, I always say, call them. They're in a video, call them up and ask them questions. Maybe they'll offer you a job. All right, here's another very good, very honest interview with one of the man that built Google into the empire that it is, Eric Schmidt. Really good video, very good movie. As I was saying about figuring things out on your own. It's about these women that were back in the 1960s, a whole messy thing in America, but nonetheless, there's one example where they get a brand new IBM mainframe and no one can figure out how to use it. And one of the women, very intelligently, she says, well, I'll just figure it out. And she goes to the library and gets a book and reads about it. So a lot of times young people are like, well, I don't know how. It's like, well, you better figure it out. Like people just don't have time to sit down and explain things. Like at least where I work, they'd say, I don't know. I told you it's wrong. Go figure out why. So there's just some examples of videos. There's some examples of some of the files. So I hope you get a sense for, what a program like this would entail, at least on my end, at least on the sort of the data analysis end. Again, I'm not a programmer. Someone else will speak to you about Python and about SQL Server and, these kind of, also, networking tools and, what's the other term? Data mining. Well, not data mining as much as like artificial intelligence. All right, that's not my area. Okay. All right, but this is my area of experience. So can I answer any questions? Was it what you're looking for? Was it helpful? Was it too fast? I just try to give you a little background. Yeah, go ahead. Any questions? Let me give you you can get this here at the Dropbox link at the top if you want the information, but here, I'll give it to you again. All right, this Dropbox is for this course. Then there's some other ones. If you want, here's the 3 courses that I did. So you can see those and you get the Dropbox, the notes are there, all the files, and then some things about Power BI, Tableau, research methods. All right, so make available, anyone who wants to work, it's available.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Professor. I would like to find out data-driven decision mistakes that we should try at all costs to avoid?
Okay, so the kinds of mistakes that people make. I
Exactly.
think what I've seen is that they get like a false like correlation. Like they think there's a relationship where they're one that doesn't exist. For example, by the amount of maybe walk by traffic and sales or something in a business. And so they end up analyzing the wrong thing. Maybe it has to do with like the new products you have or that they got paid at the beginning of the month. I think people don't think broadly enough from what I saw. They narrow in on the first thing they think about and think that must be the solution, but it's not the right way to do it. I think you have to really think, wait a minute, that came too quickly. Let me think, is there another reason or another way to look at our business? Also, I think they just make mistakes in the quantitative part. They miss one number, they put hard input in the output section, which you can't do. They use columns wrong, like in every worksheet, column, F should be 2022. They make like careless things that I even saw people from, the founders of the company I work went to Harvard and Yale, and they hired a lot of guys from Harvard and Yale, but they're smart, definitely. But common sense, sometimes they make mistakes. They just set things up in a funny way. So I think people aren't diligent enough in the research. They just don't dig really, really relentlessly. Like if you have any anomaly or any doubt, you have to do it. Even if it's, again, for me, if it was 2 a.m, I'd be like, oh my God, it's 2 a.m, but I just realized that now I'm gonna have to work another hour. So, whatever it takes to give the final product, make it the best possible, because if you want to work in a competitive business, I would say you have to, but those are the mistakes that I think that I've seen, at least. Just sort of false positives, going with the gut too quickly, not considering different alternatives, setting up the file poorly, things like that. Diligence, common sense diligence is important.
Okay,
What else?
one more question.
Sure, go
Okay, somebody has raised up his hand. Somebody would like to ask a question. Mr. Olajide, Oladiji, Omotosho. You have a question?
If anyone has a question, go for it.
Does anyone have a question?
Okay, here's one here in the chat.
Okay,
thank you.
Ismail Akamu.
In case
Please go.
of insanity or module data for startup, is there any way or standard method of check before investment? No, there's no real standard way. Like, yeah, I do recommend Tableau. It's free. You can look at it for free. Tableau Public, and you can try it. It's for the Mac. If you have the new Mac, you can't use Power BI. I would say no, it's common sense. It depends. Like if you invest in things that are very easy, like funeral homes and supermarkets, everybody eats and dies, so that's not that difficult to figure that out. But if it's more complicated, then yes, like you really have to really try to get an informed sense of the consumer, markets, marketing. There's just a lot that comes into it.
Okay, another question from Mr. Abdul Karim says, sir, would you recommend Excel for big data? How about dealing with outliner in Excel?
An outlier. Yeah, I mean, an outlier the thing with Excel is it's not really good for graphing. It doesn't really allow you to do dynamic graphing. I just use it as a presentation, but you need the Power BI kind of thing to do subsets and like groupings. But you have to think again, is it an outlier? Is it a big customer that's the outlier? Well, that could be a problem. If it's a small customer, not so big, not so important. So, it's just how much resources do you want to dedicate to an outlier? This is, the corporate part of it. Like I think school is like, oh, there's an outlier, let's study it. But in the real world, that's time that could be dedicated to competing in the marketplace. So you really have to think deeply about it. But Excel is good for initial cuts of big data, for managing big data, yes. But for analyzing it properly, what's called data presentation, using Power BI or these kind of dynamic graphing programs, no, Excel is not so good for that.
No, this
Excel
is
is great for scenarios, like to say, if we pay this, and we have this customers, and we open in this market, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Excel is very good for that. Excellent for like what if analysis. But for, what I would call like big data analysis, it's not as good. You need those other programs.
Okay, I would also like to know, in most countries in this side of the world, data collection has been a very big problem. Most of our processes, like the national identification number, the BVN for the banks, we have instances whereby deadlines are given. And we also have issues with how reliable our data are. So what can you advise, especially for our own kind of environment? How can we get or make our data much more reliable than what we have? Because we can
There's
see
a
we
cost
have
to it.
an election next year, and we have issues with registration. We've had some people who have actually proposed that data gathering should be an ongoing process to ensure that we have not just data, but sufficient and reliable data. But from your experience at the national level, how can a nation like ours improve the quality of data?
It's hard because the collection, it's costly, and it just, it comes down to, like, it's not just at the national, but it's sort of the local level, the sub-local, the community level. Are you getting honest and reliable data? It's how well the systems are. Like, I found working in different countries, like when I worked in Eastern Europe, it was hard to get reliable data. But what you can do, you can't really control that much. I mean, if you're the one gathering the data and you're the government agency, okay, you have to dedicate resources and try to do it in an accurate way. But if the problem is, say you're doing work in a country that just doesn't have very accurate data, you've got to substantiate it. Just like use common sense. Like if you're in Peru and they have a certain number of GDP per whatever something, look at another country there like Bolivia and think like, wow, it's so much higher or lower. Something's wrong. It doesn't make sense. So you have to use common sense and just substantiate it, I would say, because a lot of times it's not accurate. The riskier things that you do, the less accurate the data is and requires more judgment. So to answer it, dedicate more capital, more money, more effort to making it more accurate. But I would look at it even more. What if it's not accurate? How can I substantiate and justify it so that we don't make a critical mistake? Secondary, tertiary source. Like, I never liked when someone came to me and said, the company said, like, oh, you mean Merrill Lynch said they're going to make this money next year? Like, of course they said that, but can they? You got to then go investigate and think like, no, they can't. The market is too small. They don't have the credit line. Their customers are already occupied with another company. Like, you have to substantiate. That's how you earn your money. Because if you just listen to what some company says, you're not really adding value. So that's how I would say about it.
Thank you, Professor.
Let's see, someone asked the question here, does historical perspective has any influence in decision-making with respect to data? Sure. I mean, history can be some guide to the future, but it's not always. So if someone said, how many iPhones are going to be sold in Brazil, next year, I guess you could look at what they did last year and the year before, but something might have changed. Maybe there's more foreigners moved in who have money. Maybe new companies opened up there, things like that. So you've got to really do a bottoms-up look. What factors drive iPhone sales, and are those factors being met in the market, and things like that. It's not simple as just like, let's take a historical trend. That's sort of, in school sometimes they teach this stuff like using weighted average smoothing. I forget what they call it, but just like moving averages. That's not going to be paid much for that because it's too easy and it's not accurate. Things change dramatically sometimes. Recessions, competitors, those are what you really have to figure out, and the impact, not just say a new competitor moved in, but a new competitor moved in and we're going to lose $2.7 million as a result. And here's my recommendation, how much to spend not to. So history can be a guide. Sure. Guy has very bad credit rating. Like, we would never do business with people that had declared bankruptcy. My boss just would not do business with them. And all right, so maybe he's right or wrong, but he said we have other people we can do business with. I'm not doing business with people that declared bankruptcy. All right, so would you please, sir, call me Marshall.
Then another question.
Would
Usman Ali is asking, please, would you recommend we invest resources in training?
Yeah, but not much. It's not that much to train. Like, the program Tableau itself is not hard to use. These are not complex programs. They just allow you to graph and drag and drop. The harder part is knowing what to graph. So if I said to you, let's talk about I don't know, Telecom Italia or Tesla Motors, and you're going to gather like 10 important statistics about their customers. What are they? Income, distance from a filling station. Do they live in a house or an apartment? How far do they drive per week? I mean, that's part of it, knowing what to gather. And then, okay, the Tableau part is just putting it in a form. But then you have to know what is a sensible subset. So maybe I look at all drivers who live within 20 miles of their workplace. All right, then you might look all drivers within 20 miles of their workplace who earn more than X, who go out of town at least once a week. Like you could keep breaking it down, but some of the breakdowns just might not make sense. Like either it might be too small of a segment now, or there's no point in looking at it that way. And so this I saw too. I remember one instance, a guy was a very smart guy, went to Brown University, which is an Ivy League school, and he did this very complicated analysis that made no sense. And I was like, but what does this show? Like you have a very complicated formula. So I would say, yes, maybe one day of Tableau training would be sufficient probably to use it and know how to use it. It's not hard to use, but it's like Excel, but it's knowing how to gain the insight and what are the sensible ways to cut and slice the data. I just give you one last example. Like there's one, I don't know if you go to this Power BI Tableau, this one, there's a folder that has some Power BI done files in it. You can see them, it's listed in the notes. One of them is golf. All right, I got this data set and it showed golfers. And I was trying to figure out what is it that correlates with high earnings in golf. Was it time you get in the fairway, your average score, whatever? None of it worked. There was no correlation with anything. Finally, the only thing that correlated was standard deviation of their score, not the score itself. But if they had a volatile score, they get a 70, then a 90, then a 55, they earn less money. If they were consistently getting the same score, they earn more money. Finally, all right, so the Tableau or Power BI allows you to see that, but there's no one that's just going to tell you that something isn't adding up. You've got to look at deeper, some other way, the standard deviation, the variability. So yes, I think it's worth doing a day of training, but part of the course is on that. That is covered in the master's course, Power BI and Tableau. I don't know if that's too long of an answer, but anyone else?
Any
I
other
would just
question?
summarize by saying this. There's no easy way. There's no website you go to that gives you the answer. There's none of that. Unless you're dealing with like a funeral home. Yes, I mean, okay, you can easily know how many people died last year. And probably it's linear this year. But usually you're working on things that are more complex. And like maybe a luxury item into the market and thinking, well, who's going to buy this? And what is their evidence that they would pay for this? And things like that. That's much harder. And there is no website to go to. It's relentlessly digging, calling people in the industry, having them justify what you've looked at, sending you in another direction, informing till you can make finally an informed decision and use Excel to put it in some form that you can run scenarios and test, or Power BI to get some breakdowns of the different segments in the market. For example, here, if you go to this website, Research Methods, there's a notes there for a course just on research. I'm doing not academic research, but like business research, market research. Like I did a lot of it. Like you have to go online, get information, then call people in the industry, like at trade publications, at lobbying groups, at investment companies that invest in these. You just have to call everyone and ask increasingly depthful questions. But it's hard. There's no easy way to do it. And that's how I would close. So what we can look at in a course is different tools, and you can gain mastery over the tool, but it's still, you need the input that makes the tool work well. And that's your brain and sensibly figuring out what data I need in a market. It's different in each market, each product. You just have to be really in tune with it. But the better you are, the better people you work with, So I don't know, just say this last thing. If you think, oh, what do I mean? Tesla, for example, it's not only how much money you make, it's how much money, government policy on filling stations, distance from work, average distance traveled, figuring out the value of each of those. That's one thing. Let's say you're going to open, make a new movie, and it's going to be $100 million movie for children, let's say. That's another type of analysis. What children have free time, What is the education level of the average parent that takes the child to one of these movies? How much disposable income do they have in the market? What are the competing alternative sources of entertainment for them, and putting a weight on each one? So, and then figuring out, calling people and asking and informing yourself about, distribution, production, resale of the items that are, in it, like the toys and things. Like it's complicated, but it's enjoyable, and you learn a ton doing it. So I think, I learned a lot about a lot of different industries doing this work. Even sometimes it was so difficult, they would hire at a $5,000 or $10,000 a day ex-CEOs of companies to come travel with us. So we would go visit a company's warehouses, their production facilities. We're like, we can't go blind. We're taking the ex-president of Exxon with us, and they'll come with you. And so we got to meet people like that. But so it's a lot of work, but it's good work and requires good skills. Anyone else? Okay, well, I think for me, if you want, we can close. I think we dedicate, I mean, I can keep going. I'm happy to do it, but we dedicated an hour, so I don't want to take up someone else's time or do too much. But anyway, I hope it was helpful. And you get a good sense of the kind of things that, at least if, the class that I had, what we would do and what kind of things that would be covered in the masters, at least from the analytical side. Again, there's the programming and computing side, which is a different element.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor.
My
It has been a really insightful session. And would like to say, if you have a final word of encouragement for the team,
I'm sorry?
I would like to hear from you. We would like to hear if you have final words of encouragement for us.
Yes, I would say have faith. Like it's not a question of brain capacity to do this. I work with many people, just luckily, I don't know, Harvard, Princeton, all that. That's where they hired from. And I went for MBA, I went to a decent school. It's common sense. It's your curiosity more than anything. If you're a curious person, if you're not, I think you have a problem. But if you, tap into your curiosity, let that guide you. Just wonder, like, why does someone buy a Tesla car and someone else not? Let me figure out what are the factors that drive that, and how can I learn that, and what evidence can I present that will substantiate my case? You can't just say they'll do it. You got to find evidence. So just have faith. And there's my style is I just gather everything, throw it into a document, like a Word document, unsorted, nothing. Then I go through and I try to make sense of it, massage it, make sense of it, call. And so just be relentless. But also when you're doing it, say you call someone, you call like a research person, or you call a trade publication or a consultant, and they're helpful, help them back. When you uncover information that might help them, call them and say, hey, you helped me last week. I just want to give you something I found. It could be helpful to you. That's how you make, quote, friends that then think of you. So be a giver, don't take, give, be a giver. And you can do it. Like, it's just a matter of like digging and digging relentlessly. There's no easy way. Just put yourself in the shoes of having to invest a lot of money in a new idea. Who would you want helping you? A guy that says, oh, I talked to my friend and he said this, or a guy that goes and really does some very in-depth research and presents it, not in an overly complex way, in a way that's easy to use. People need to be able to use your work easily, toggle things, change things, that the Word document is very easy to follow, the Excel, people have a lot of stuff. They don't like getting stuff on their desk and they're like, what is this? I learned that, all right, by getting yelled at. You want to put big capital letters. Here's what you asked for. Here's what it shows. Here's my recommendation. And then easily numbers. So when they're talking about it on the phone with their other executives, they can say, go to page 3, line 7, not, I don't know, I see this word. Picture people using your work. The more they can use your insights, the more, you'll be invaluable. But anyone can do it. Just trust your instincts and your business sense, and do great work. That's it. There's no other work to do than great work. So that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you so much for being part of Room Business School Nigeria.
My pleasure.
It's been a great session with you, and I'm so sure everybody actually has the same opinion. We'd like to call on our admission and sales manager, Mr. Christopher Lawal, to tell us more about the program.
Okay, all right. I'll listen for a bit. I may jump soon, but I just want to say thank you. It's always a pleasure when you guys come to Rome, and it's really nice. I'm free for a while. And if I in any way have my email at the top of the notes, always email, call anytime. I can help, or I can find a smarter friend. They can help. Thank you very much.
We appreciate that, sir. Mr. Christopher.
All right, thank you very much, Vincent. I appreciate thank you, Professor Marshall, for the insights into data analysis. It's a powerful session. And thank you so much, Vincent, for also moderating these sessions. Okay, we're very grateful. All right, so I'll be briefly just discussing walking the audience through the various master's program we offer at Rome Business School. Of course, we're having a data science webinar session. Okay, so we have the masters in data science, where data analysis is being discussed, how to use the high-level programming languages that professor says not really fun, not really his field. Okay, and of course a host of other things. Okay, so the masters in data science is very rich. We have the program accredited by DASCA, that is Data Science Council of America. Okay, that gives our students an opportunity to get certification with Data Science Council of America. Of course, they house professionals in the data science field. Okay, so coming on board for the master's program, we give you a lot of insights and of course to understand how to optimize business and of course increase profitability. You know, that is the goal of data science. Okay, we also have the masters in international human resources management. Okay, targeted at our human resource professionals. Okay, those looking to deepen their understanding, become equipped to become a better human resource professional. So this master's is suitable for these categories of professionals. Okay, we have the Masters of Business Administration. This master's program, of course, is targeted at business owners and professionals in senior managerial positions. Okay, they're looking to get managerial competencies to understand how to drive change in the business area. So this master's is definitely suited for these categories of people. We have the masters in agribusiness management, also suitable for those within the agri space. Okay, it doesn't matter where you are in the value chain. Okay, the masters enables you to understand what is trending, take advantages of the opportunities, and see how you continue to add value and also contribute to part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We also have the masters in marketing and sales, of course, for marketing professionals, those looking for strategies to drive sales, create visibility for their brands. This master's program is for them. And of course, most of these masters, you have other professional certification you can also get, to give you a competitive advantage in the industry. And we have the masters in logistics and supply chain management. Okay, and this master's is also suitable and suited for professionals within the logistics space, those looking to drive change, moving product from point of origin to point of consumption. Okay, and all of the intricacies in between. This master's is also suitable for them. And we have the masters in project management, targeted at project management professionals, those handling projects, from end to end, no matter the industries. This master's is for you. And we also have the Project Management Institute. We're an authorized training partner with the PMI. Okay, so coming on board for the master also equips you to be able to take the PMP certification whenever you're ready to do that. Okay, and we also have other master's program, okay, that we have, and we also have the international masters, okay, which is targeted at younger graduates, those just starting out their career. Okay, that's the International Masters of Business Administration, and of course, the International Masters in Digital Marketing and Business Transformation. Okay, so these masters are targeted at young graduates, graduate managers, those starting out their career, equipping them with what is needed to be able to take on the challenges of the 21st century business place. Okay, we have 12 master's program currently running and 2 international master's programs. So no matter where your industry is, you have a master's that is suitable for you and that they can use, to scale up what you do and of course become more efficient in the business place. Okay, to get more information in respect to our master's program, you can visit www.romebusinessschool.ng, rather www.romebusinessschool.ng. So this will give you insight into our various master's program, our other activities, and of course you have access to our e-research center also on the platform. Okay, and of course, if you can also reach out to your advisors for those that were invited, those are yet to enroll. Okay, enrollment is currently ongoing, and of course, you also have some special scholarship consideration that you can also use to help cushion the effect of the tuition fee, and you can be considered for this. So this also helps you. So you can reach out to your advisors, you know, to give you more insights into how to assess the scholarship available for you. I also want to once again appreciate Professor Mashar for a wonderful and insightful session on data analysis. And of course, I'll hand over now to the moderator, Mr. Vincent Edward, to take it up from there. Thank you so much for giving me the audience.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Christopher. Once again, thank you, Professor Marshall. Now, on behalf of our country director, Humphrey Kanazo, and our dean, Professor Ragusa, we'll say a big thank you for joining us. We look forward to much more interesting sessions with you. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
All right, thank you, audience, for joining this conversation. We are glad to have you guys on board. We look forward to having you for our forthcoming events and, of course, our power-packed webinars, you know, targeted at various industries. Okay, it's been a pleasure from this end. Do have a fabulous evening and a wonderful rest of the day. Bye from here.